34 drivers, cars, and teams will compete to earn one of the coveted 33 spots in this year's Indianapolis 500 to earn the right to race at over 230 miles an hour for 3 hours just to drink a glass of milk at the end of the road. So who are the 34? Let's meet those modern gladiators who will do battle in chariots made of space-age material and race at out-of-this-world speeds. 8 former champions of the 500 have returned for another shot at Indy glory. Mired in controversy over an illegal use of IndyCar's push-to-pass system at St. Petersburg, which saw his apparent race win taken away in an unprecedented disqualification, Joseph Newgarden returns to the Indy 500 as the defending champion of the race, but with the added weight and immense outside pressure of that scandal which has rocked the IndyCar world. Last year, Newgarden joined Sam Hanks and Tony Kanaan as the drivers with the most starts prior to an Indy 500 win. The last driver to win back-to-back in the Indy 500 was Helio Castroneves in 2001 and 2002. Helio is back this year, and much like his record-tying 4th Indy 500 win in 2021, he enters this year's 500 as an Indy-only driver. Helio became a minority shareholder in his team, Meyer-Shank Racing, last year, and he's looking to do something no one else has ever done as a driver: win a 5th Indianapolis 500. The only other multiple winner entered in this year's race is two-time champion Takuma Sato. Sato is back with the Rahal Letterman Lanigan team for the first time since 2021, and that's the team he won his second 500 with in the bizarre August 500 in 2020. The man Sato beat to the line in 2020 was Scott Dixon, who won the 500 way back in 2008. But no driver has had so many great chances to win a second Indy 500 dashed by bad luck since the great Mario Andretti. Dixon's always fast at the Indianapolis 500, but the driver who took away Mario's second place on the all-time IndyCar wins list also seems to have inherited the Andretti luck. Alexander Rossi scored a victory in the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500 for the Andretti team in 2016. He returns to the Speedway in his second year with Arrow McLaren, looking to take the papaya colors back to victory lane for the first time since Johnny Rutherford walked into victory lane after winning the shortest Indy 500 in history in 1976, stopped just after 102 laps for rain. Will Power hasn't won an IndyCar race since 2022, and in recent years hasn't been a factor in the 500. Power, a driver still as competitive and as fast as he's ever been, is looking to turn that around and score his second 500 crown. Marcus Ericsson nearly went back-to-back in last year's 500, if not for a timely late red flag. The 2022 Indy 500 winner has switched teams this year and makes his first appearance at the Speedway driving for the Andretti Global team. And it's hard to believe that it's already been 10 years since Ryan Hunter-Reay's triumphant victory in the 2014 Indianapolis 500. RHR is back in search of his second taste of milk for the second year in a row with Indy 500 specialist team Dreyer and Reinbold Racing with Cusick Motorsports. The strongest rookie class in years descends on the Speedway. There are 7 in all, with vastly different racing backgrounds. Formula 2 prospect Marcus Armstrong has never raced before on an oval, but he's already nearly got a full season of IndyCar racing under his belt. He's one of 3 rookies driving for Chip Ganassi Racing this year, and he reminds many in the paddock of a young Scott Dixon. Tom Blomqvist moves over to the IndyCar series from a full-time career racing in prototype sports cars. He's already scored major wins at the Daytona 24 Hours and at Petit Le Mans, but challenging the Indy 500 will be his biggest career race to date. Linus Lundqvist is the 2022 Indy Lights champion, but was overlooked for an IndyCar ride in 2023. His golden opportunity came when he got a call from Mike Shank to replace injured Simon Pagenaud at Nashville. His performance impressed Chip Ganassi so much that Linus was signed to replace Marcus Ericsson in 2024. Linus has big shoes to fill, but he's got the chip on his shoulder to prove that he belongs. Christian Rasmussen won the Indy Next Championship last year and secured a ride with Ed Carpenter Racing this year. Rasmussen finds himself with a team that always steps up their program at the biggest race. Rasmussen could surprise. Nolan Siegel's full-time job is competing for HMD Motorsports in the Indy Next Series. where he scored 3 career wins. He crosses over to the big leagues to attempt to qualify for his first points-paying IndyCar race ever. The first driver ever to race under the flag of the Cayman Islands, Barbados-born Kyffin Simpson brings Indy Next and LMP2 experience to a 5th entry from Chip Ganassi Racing. And of course, NASCAR Cup Series point leader Kyle Larson makes a much-anticipated Indy 500 debut for Arrow McLaren and Hendrick Motorsports. He's the first driver to attempt the Indy 500 World 600 at Charlotte double in 10 years, when Kurt Busch came home in 6th place at the Indy 500. Larson has made fans all over the United States racing everything and anything he can get his hands on, and because of that is one of the most decorated rookies ever at the Speedway. He brings a NASCAR Cup Series championship, wins in the Knoxville Nationals, Chili Bowl, and Daytona 24 Hours. Larson is cut from the same cloth as the Indy greats of the past like A.J. Foyt, Parnelli Jones, and Mario Andretti. He even won the last Hoosier 100 on the dirt at the Indiana State Fairgrounds on the same day as the 2020 Indy 500. The rest of the drivers are an eclectic mix of coulda, woulda, and shoulda, and there's no better example of that than Marco Andretti, who has been trying to win the Indianapolis 500 for nearly 20 years. But he's never come as close as he did in his first 500, finishing second to Sam Hornish Jr. by the wink of an eye. The insanely popular Argentinian stock car ace Agustin Canapino returns for his second Indy 500. His team has nicknamed him the Titan for this month. One of 3 owner drivers in the field, Ed Carpenter is always a name mentioned as a potential winner. Carpenter has scored a 500-mile race win before, in 2012 at the now-defunct Auto Club Speedway in Fontana, California. Wants to equal that feat at his home track and immortalize himself on the Borg Warner Trophy. Connor Daly returns to the Speedway this year driving for Dreyer Reinbold Racing with Cusick Motorsports. Daly's been knocking on the door of victory at the 500 for several years now. He led the most laps in the 2021 race. Santino Ferrucci nearly found himself in victory lane last year with a spectacular 3rd-place finish for A.J. Foyt Racing. All of the ingredients that produced that recipe for success are back, and most importantly, speed wizard Michael Cannon returns to the team. A Foyt car returning to Indianapolis victory lane would be immensely popular. It hasn't happened since Kenny Breck won the Indy 500 for the team back in 1999. The famous Fittipaldi name returns to the Speedway, and once again, it is Pietro carrying it. Fittipaldi is the grandson of 2-time 500 winner Emerson Fittipaldi, and will attempt to qualify one of 4 Rahal Letterman Lanigan cars into the field. Pietro has 1 previous start back in 2021. Romain Grosjean, the Phoenix, moves from Andretti Autosport to Juncos Hollinger Racing this year. The Speedway, and in particular Turn 2, have not been kind to this Swiss-born Frenchman. He's crashed in that corner in both previous 500 starts. Success at the Speedway has been hard to come by for Colton Herta. Highly touted as a global talent, Herta was looking like a contender for victory last year till a collision in the pits with teammate Romain Grosjean scuppered his hopes of a first Indy win. Callum Ilott makes a surprise return to the Speedway after David Malukas, who was originally slated to drive the number 6 car, was let go from Arrow McLaren after an off-season wrist injury did not heal quickly enough to meet his contractual obligations. Ilott just took victory in the 6 hours of Spa and is one of 4 drivers entered in this year's Indianapolis 500 who can realistically win both the Indy 500 and the Le Mans 24 Hours in the same year. That hasn't been achieved since A.J. Foyt did it in 1967. Captain Kirk, Kyle Kirkwood, has been one of the few drivers on the IndyCar circuit that can challenge the Penske Ganassi juggernaut for race victories. Scoring 2 last year, both on street courses, Kirkwood was looking strong in last year's race. But unfortunately, his most memorable Indy moment was this spectacular crash in last year's race, sliding upside down on the backstretch. Kyle walked away and is looking to put this moment in everyone's rearview mirror. Catherine Legg is back, partnering with Dale Coyne Racing and makeup company ELF to attempt to qualify for her 4th 500, after qualifying last year for Rahal Letterman Lanigan. Legg is looking to improve on last year's 33rd place finish. Christian Lundgaard broke into IndyCar victory lane last year at Toronto, but is yet to see the same type of success on oval tracks. Last year's Indy 500 was a struggle for the Rahal team, and Lundgaard just barely qualified in the last row shootout. Scott McLaughlin has been spectacular just about everywhere in IndyCar except at Indianapolis in the month of May. The only remaining driver at Team Penske yet to score an Indy 500 win has legions of fans in his native New Zealand and neighboring Australia for his heroics in the Supercars Championship. Someday, Pato O'Ward will win the Indy 500. Each and every year he comes so close, and each and every year he falls just short. Pato was declared the winner of the St. Petersburg, Florida race after Joseph Newgarden was disqualified and currently holds the dubious distinction of being the first IndyCar driver in history with 1 win on the season and 0 laps led. Expect that to change. Alex Palou is another driver due for an Indy 500 win. The current pole speed track record holder at over 234 miles an hour, Palou is also the reigning IndyCar champion. When he wins races, he wins them often, and they are dominant performances. Palou dominated last year's Indy 500 until a collision in the pits, which was no fault of his, dropped him out of contention for victory. Despite this, he still finished a remarkable 4th. The center of attention of much of last year's month of May was Graham Rahal. Almost 30 years to the day of his own father's failure to qualify for the 1993 Indianapolis 500, Rahal found himself also bumped from the starting field. But in one of the most bizarre situations in Indy 500 history, a crash caused by his own teammate Catherine Legg, which injured driver Stephen Wilson, allowed Rahal to cross enemy lines and take the seat vacated by the injured Wilson. Rahal's race was over before it even started last year, with a battery failure that caused him to miss the first 2 laps of the race, and he never got a chance to show what he could do. Rahal looks to recover from last year's failures and return to the form that brought him 2 podium finishes at the 500. Stingray Robb finds himself in a great position to contest his second Indy 500. A ride with the A.J. Foyt team means the man from Idaho, named after a Corvette, will be driving one of the fastest Chevys in the field. Felix Rosenqvist has been rejuvenated, switching from Arrow McLaren to Meyer Shank Racing. He started on the front row of last year's race with a legitimate shot at victory, but a mistake caused him to crash out with just under 20 laps to go. Redemption is the word of the month for Felix. And ditto that for Rocket Rinus VeeKay. In 4 Indy starts, Rinus has never qualified lower than 4th, and he's been on the front row in each of the last 3 years. Rinus' weakness has been in the race. Inconsistency and mistakes have cost the young Dutchman a spot in victory lane. One thing, though, is certain. Rinus will play a factor, one way or the other, on race day. So that's the 34 cars and drivers racing for 33 spots and a place in racing immortality. Let me know what you think of this year's field and subscribe for more Indy 500 content. Practice is scheduled to start tomorrow, and we will have all of the coverage leading up to the 108th running of the greatest spectacle in racing. Stay tuned.